Hi, it's Stacie.
Hello?
Hi, we did it.
Oh, you did it. Okay, then I'll take down Skype.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hi, Stacie. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, everybody, this is Ray Luskin of The Winnie Adventure and The Creative Activist. And today my guest is Stacie. And Stacie, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Chaiken.
Chaiken, okay. I wasn't quite sure, so I wanted to make sure I got it right. Stacie is a performer, a writer. She is an educator and an activist and an amazing woman, and I'm so excited for everybody to get to know her. So, Stacie, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became involved in theater just to begin with? What prompted that?
I've been interested in theater ever since I was a little kid. I guess I was shy, and we moved a lot. So when you're shy and you move a lot, you get to recreate yourself at every point, and I guess there's something connected to performance, acting, recreating, things like that. Possibility, even. New possibility. Yeah. I
love that term, a possibility. That's wonderful. I mean, all your work is around telling stories. So how did that evolve for you? You know, and what is it about everybody's narrative that so intrigues you?
Well, for years I was an actress and entering other people's stories, and I found myself drawn to new plays, people who were creating things and being involved in the process of creating them, in theater companies in New York. And when I moved to Los Angeles, there was something about, it was a hard move to Los Angeles almost 20 years ago, coming here mid-career, and my mother was very sick on the East Coast, and she was furious that I had left. And what came up for me was I'd started writing things based on personal stories. Specifically, my grandfather was in his 90s, and he was born somewhere in Europe. We knew that, but and our name is Russian, and I just had always been fascinated by the fact that our name was Russian. He wouldn't say anything about our family and how we came over or where we came from, or specifically his father. And there was something in the coming over for me from New York to Los Angeles and being kind of an immigrant here myself, and that I think drew me more and more to be curious about him and our family story, and the sense I had that something terrible happened that nobody would ever talk about. So I came here, I worked a lot in LA, and then I had, some money in the bank and nothing to do in the summer because there was no work at that point in the summer. There was a real hiatus. And I had started writing little things about my grandfather and his tools. He was a machinist. And I had this thing about his tools, and I asked him if, when he no longer needed his tools, would he give them to me? And he promptly sold them to somebody else.
Wow.
Because he just didn't want me to have them. I remember my father calling me and saying, your grandfather sold the tools to a collector in New Jersey for almost nothing, and they were worth a lot of money. And the first thing I wrote was about him selling those tools because there was something in the legacy of those tools that he didn't want to pass down to me. And I kept peeling into that, and I wound up writing something about about kind of the immigrant wound in my family called Looking for Louis, looking for this guy Louis who's that's my great-grandfather. And
okay.
And I didn't identify it as that. I didn't identify it as something about family trauma until I went. That play led me to people saw that play and invited me to write my next play in Israel. And it wasn't until I got to Israel that I started, and that was in the immediate wake of my mother's death, and it was in the middle of the Intifada in Israel, and I was looking at generational cruelty in the land that I was in, and also uncovering generational violence within the, on the maternal line in my family. And so I went there not knowing what I was going to write about, and I was taken to one of those archaeological sites where there is layer upon layer upon layer of civilization, one, burning the next, cremating the next, massacring, and I thought, well, that looks a lot like my family.
Oh,
and
wow.
So
I've got goosebumps as you're talking. Oh my God, yeah, the imagery you're creating is amazing, and I've been to Israel, and I do relate to some of what you're saying. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I kind of stepped into. Then I looked back at Looking for Louie and realized we're really talking about the same thing. We're talking about generational violence or generational shame. And the question comes up, what, if anything, can be done to break that chain in the case of Looking for Louie, or my Israel play, which is called The Dig, which is the piece that I'm bringing into the world now, positing if the violence somehow enters our DNA, either really or poetically, and there is some evidence, there's certainly poetically, yes, and there's some evidence that that violence and trauma actually does affect the genetic code in terms of passing something down. Can we rewrite the code? Is there any way to rewrite the code?
And what do you think?
I think yes, but I think the only way the yes will come about is if we give up things that are crucial, we believe to be crucial to our identities as people, as individuals. That if we continue to hang on to the same understandings of who we are and how we function, then nothing can change.
Well, I love this conversation because it is about peace around the world, and my personal issue is about violence against women. So I told, wherever you are in the world or whatever, everything is based on personal experience, and we respond in the world. And I was sexually abused as a child, so I've experienced that the fear, the story of, oh my God, am I going to abuse my children? And no, right. It's not. I didn't. But I went to a lot of therapy and I tried to work on that because I was terrified. Because
sure.
It was, you worry it's going to come down generationally, and what is that going to look like? So. And it affects you emotionally, physically. It's in your body, and I do believe in somatic response. So I know I've done a lot of work to release it in my body and in that cellular place because, with a lot of art and scribbles and doodles and physical release and, energetic work, because I know it took me a long time, because if you go around in the world saying it's not safe, then things don't change, because then you project onto other people, and then the fear is there, and that's the underlying current that I see, and that's what happens generationally. There's always this fear, and I know I have friends whose parents were Holocaust survivors, and my brother-in-law, and and I've seen how that affects you. Whether they've talked about it or not, it affects you. So I totally get that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very powerful. So I think it's amazing how you arrived at this place in your life to do this work. So now I know that you said you've done some work with Shoah. Can you talk about that? And then some of your work with the genocide in Rwanda now?
The trajectory seems to have been trauma in my family, trauma in the Middle East, and the Middle East play drew the attention of people who are working on the Holocaust, including the Shoah Foundation, and I was commissioned to make a piece based on Holocaust materials, and became close to the people at the Shoah Holocaust and Genocide Archive. And it was, what I did with them was I became very interested in the role of the artist in terms of transformation and what our transaction with an audience is. And if I'm going to be making a piece based on Holocaust materials, I think this is where it really, I was aware of it with the Israel stuff because Israel is so polarizing, and I had the privilege of being there for almost 2 years. And what do I bring forth? What do I bring home from there? What do I have to say that will do some good?
Mm-hmm.
And then entering the Holocaust, which is even more difficult and is related to the issue in Israel, because a lot of the identity of Israel is based upon its being a Jewish state, a sanctuary post-Holocaust. Whether that's true or not is another story, but that's the narrative. So I became interested in what our responsibility is as artists when we witness or stand in witness of really catastrophic narratives like Holocaust, like genocide, like the conflict in the Middle East. And I realized that is an interesting dynamic, an interesting mandate, if you will, that we have a responsibility to communicate something to an audience, to frame it, to frame what we have seen, to frame what we have interacted with to an audience in such a way that they can engage with it. Because so much of it is they're traumatized. The world is traumatized by this stuff. Nobody wants to go anywhere near it.
Right.
But if we can translate, if we can, like I like to say, metabolize, if we can metabolize it and bring forth something with which an audience can engage, engagement is good. Engagement is awareness. So the first project I did with Shoah after I did the Holocaust piece, What She Left, was a conference for theater artists in Los Angeles called Witness and Responsibility, which was really neat. And after that, they asked me to do some programming, some performative programming. And so I did a piece, an evening where I directed a Cambodia piece, like Katrine See You, and then a monologue from a survivor from Rwanda, and then the head of the Shoah Foundation, Stephen Smith, was the director of the executive director of Shoah, was the executive director of Kwibuka, which is the commemoration of the genocide in Rwanda, and it was the 20th commemoration in 2014. And Stephen asked me if I would be the international creative director of the commemoration. And originally, I thought that meant coming up with some fabulous immersive installation at Kigali Genocide Memorial, which is a museum and also a resting place for nearly 250,000 people. And I said, sure, that sounds great. And, we'll do music, we'll do this, and with, places where people can meditate and pray. And when I got there, it turns out that my job was to create an overriding narrative for all the national, meaning in Rwanda, and international events for the commemoration. So it was a very different job than I thought it would be, and a much bigger job than I thought it would be. So that's what I did.
Wow. And how long were you in Rwanda?
I was there, over the course of 9 months. The longest time I was there was 4 times, and the longest time I was there was 2 months.
Wow.
So I went back and forth, but basically living on Rwanda time for 9 months.
Wow. So I guess I want to ask, what keeps you going? I mean, you sound like a dynamo. I know everybody has these, moments of stuckness or, but what keeps you going? What inspires you daily to keep going with this? Because this is tough stuff. This isn't easy to absorb.
Yeah. I have to say I've been back from Rwanda just over a year, and there was a period of time when I really had no idea what would keep me going. It is very difficult. You don't come away from this stuff untouched,
right?
And there's sort of a lot of trying to figure things out. It was not an easy ride for me in Rwanda. I was there during a time when suddenly the government brings me in, says make all these things, we want to be seen around the world, and then all of a sudden sanctions came into place from the UN and the U.S. with regard to their complicity in Congo. So I came away and I needed to rest. My brain needed to rest, and what keeps me going, I guess, is what puts me back in motion, I guess, is this, especially with this Israel play, is the real strong feeling that I have something that's important to say and that I don't see anybody else saying. I have a way of looking at this stuff that, if I'm honest with myself, it's irresponsible for me not to do everything I can to move this into the world.
Wow.
And then there's the counteracting thing. So maybe it's all in my own mind. Maybe this is not really that important. Maybe I should just, go to Hawaii, which is what I really want to do. And
I think every creative activist goes through those moments. Moments.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But
right, but it is important. We're here. I totally believe we're here for a purpose. Each one of us has a calling, and there's a story, and we have a voice and a vision, and that we need to share it, whatever that is, and whatever platform, whatever form, and it's really important. And obviously, you have been drawn to something starting with your great grandfather, and it's like, wow, these stories, this is your calling, obviously, and it's brought you this far in the world. So how do you renew and recharge? I mean, I know you said you were really tired. So what do you do for yourself?
Let's see. I live in a beautiful home with a lovely, loving man and a brilliant 14-year-old dog. And I come home and I really try to focus on how lucky I am and how grateful I am for to be able to afford to take these kinds of rides. That I have. This is obviously what I'm interested in. There's something about difficulty and chaos and what I like to call the iridescent dark light of our experience as humans that is interesting to me and is kind of the only thing that's interesting to me. I'm not interested in smooth things. I'm interested in things that are really, really bumpy because that seems real to me. So
interesting.
And you need and for years I had kind of no home. For years I was a real nomad, and I had no home. And now I have a real solid home and a real solid, base with a family. And I think that's where my ability to take these rides comes from. I wouldn't be able to do it without that.
Beautiful. What is the legacy you'd like to leave?
Oh my Lord, that's such a good question. I think about that a lot. I think about it actually in terms of. I think of things kind of in terms of responsibility. I've been offered tremendous opportunities to see things and engage deeply in stories that are not necessarily my own, and to I think certainly my work, and I teach, which is really important to me, and I teach on a level of depth of inquiry. This I might be able to grab onto this in terms of legacy. I'm doing a 12-week process with a group of Muslims and Jews with an organization called New Ground, Muslim-Jewish Partnership for Change here. And what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to help them bring forth really strong, compelling stories about their experience working together. And those stories will go out into the world, because they're the stories that really need to be told right now from my point of view. Interfaith stories, especially, including people who are practitioners, of Islam, Muslims. So those stories, not my stories that go out into the world, their stories that go out into the world, and I guess a level of inquiry that's not easy. That's
not. Those are tough stories to bring forth. Yes, they are.
Yeah, but an approach, a level of inquiry that is difficult and challenging, and what I'd like to do is prove to people that it bears fruit.
Could you talk a little bit about the process of the 12 weeks, and what are some of the activities, or how do you get them to that place? What are the inquiries that you ask? What are the questions? How do you get them there?
Well, I don't get them there. What I do is I create a bowl, a room that allows them to get there, and what I run is a group process. Since 2001, I've run a workshop in Los Angeles called "What's a Story?" And the question is, you have all this personal experience. What story do you pull from that experience that you really want to tell? So, over the course of the 12 weeks, there's a period of time where we're just going to be dredging, digging, archaeological writing about anything that means a lot to you. And basically it's a context in which people kind of, I like the archaeology metaphor, because there's all this, when you're digging in an excavation, there's all this sand and dirt and stuff, and you dig it up and somebody runs it through a sieve, shakes it through a sieve, and it's a fine sieve, so that what stays in the sieve are beads and shards and other shiny artifacts. So the process is, you put you write very broadly, and you pull up as much raw material as possible. Anything that for some reason, comes to the surface in your imagination, and then the process is like running it through a sieve, because you bring that to a room full of people, and you dump out all the raw material for them. And then I train the room to respond very, very simply and very directly to what draws them in. That's one chapter of response. And then separately, what they're curious about, what they need to know more about. And those things that interest them, the others, those things that they're curious about are like the shards and the beads. And some of those beads you're not particularly interested in, but likely if we have a room full of people responding empathically and curiously to what you've put forward, somebody's going to pick up something that you're going to go, yeah, oh yeah. And it's the oh yeah that we chase in the next round. You know, we say, oh yeah, that's the center of it for me for right now. So the next round in terms of writing an inquiry is just about that one seed that was so shiny to you. So it's basically setting up a construct in which people are chasing, digging into their own passion, their own, the thing that is strongest for them.
Mhm. I love that, the idea that, what is somebody curious about? Because I think curiosity is what allows us to have the conversations and then shift paradigms. When we ask those questions, that we listen and we learn to be deep listeners. Everybody wants to be seen, heard, and understood. And if we develop that skill, I think we have a much better opportunity to have these conversations and change the world. So I love what you're doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the neat thing about this process is, ostensibly, people are coming into the room to be writers, to write the thing they want to write. But the collateral benefit that they come away with is this really refined sense of empathy and curiosity, and a way to use it constructively in the world. So it translates into relationships. How we do relationships. That's actually a legacy, that I'd like to leave behind. There's just that process and that way of working.
Oh, well, this is wonderful. And how can people find you and get a hold of you? And well,
I have a couple of websites. One is just staciechaiken.com, and the other
is what Chaiken. So
yes,
just spell it out. Yeah,
STACIECHAIKEN as in Nancy.com, and the website for the workshop is whatsthestoryla.com. All one word.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, thank you so much. I love this conversation, and I would love to continue it another day. I actually have some thoughts about people I could connect you with that are here in Chicago who've done some work on Muslim-Jewish relationships and worked on those kind of things as well. So that's something we can talk about later.
Wonderful. I would love to continue this.
Okay. Thank you, Stacie. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you, Ray. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. This is Ray Luskin of The Winning Adventure and Creative Activist. Have a great day. Bye-bye.